On January the 14th of 2022, North Las Vegas police received word of a multi-vehicle wreck near Cheyenne Avenue and Civic Center Drive. As per police reports, a car was making a U-turn in a center lane and inadvertently crossed paths with another oncoming vehicle. The resulting collision caused both the passenger and driver of the first car to be ejected. The second car, which was driven by Summer Butler, traveled about 150 feet before careening into some landscaping. All three of the people involved were hospitalized in the aftermath. At the hospital, Butler was reportedly acting erratic and had to be sedated by medical staff. While paramedics were tending to her wounds, a small baggie containing a white substance fell out of the left side of her bra, according to North Las Vegas police. The substance was later confirmed to be cocaine. Blood tests would reveal that Butler was high on cannabis and cocaine on the night of the crash. She also had more than the legal limit of alcohol in her system. The woman's car had been traveling at about 70 miles per hour leading up to the collision, which occurred within a 40-mile-per-hour zone. Butler was charged with DUI resulting in death, reckless driving, and being in possession of a controlled substance. In a surprising twist, law enforcement revealed that the victim who perished in the violent crash had also been intoxicated. They were more than 3 times above the legal limit of alcohol and also had a substantial amount of meth show up on toxicology reports. Butler had previously been arrested for DUI in June of the previous year and had been ordered to stay away from all drugs and alcohol. Number 8. Hannah Ray. 32-year-old Jeffrey Connor was riding his motorcycle eastbound along Gulf to Bay Boulevard in Clearwater, Florida, early on December the 4th of 2022. As the man approached the intersection with US Highway 19, the path of his motorcycle crossed with that of a westbound Toyota Prius that made a sudden reckless turn. The bike violently collided with the Prius, which sustained serious damage to its passenger side door. Connor, whose motorcycle was wrecked, was rushed to Morton Plant Hospital where he succumbed to his critical injuries. Law enforcement spoke with the driver of the Prius, identified as 28-year-old Hannah Ray. She exhibited obvious signs of intoxication, including bloodshot eyes and slurred speech. Ray's breath reportedly smelled like alcohol and she swayed back and forth while speaking with officers. After admitting to drinking alcohol before getting behind the wheel, the woman was taken into custody. She was booked at the Pinellas County Jail on a charge of DUI manslaughter, but was subsequently released on bond. Number 7. Alexandria Louise Lind. During the early hours of August the 15th of 2021, Nevada Highway Patrol was notified of a 2-vehicle crash on Interstate 15 near the Blue Diamond Road exit in Las Vegas. Trooper Travis Smacker later revealed that a BMW Z4 had broken down in the middle of the exit ramp. A woman was reportedly trying to push the disabled vehicle off the roadway when a Lexus IS 250 suddenly came barreling towards them. The Lexus plowed into the back of the BMW, causing major damage to both vehicles and severely injuring the BMW's passenger, identified as 29-year-old Jennifer Ortiz. The latter was taken to University Medical Center where she was unfortunately pronounced dead. The individual behind the wheel of the Lexus was named as Alexandria Louise Lind, aged 28. In the wreck's aftermath, she was arrested on suspicion of driving under the influence. In addition to a felony count of DUI resulting in death, Lind also faced a misdemeanor count of failing to decrease speed or use due care. Official state records indicated that she was ultimately sentenced to a minimum of 24 months and a maximum of 60 months in prison. Number 6. Brianna Noel James. At around 1:30 a.m. on February the 17th of 2019, police officers in Irving, Texas, were blocking the left lane of the roadway while a tow truck was loading one of the vehicles involved in a hit-and-run collision. The crash occurred at the intersection of southbound Loop 12 and Grauweiler Road. As first responders worked at the scene, a car suddenly blazed through, smashing into a police vehicle in the process. The officer who'd been seated in the car that was struck sustained only minor injuries. In the wake of the crash, the individual in the suspect vehicle, Brianna Noel James, was taken to a hospital as a precaution, and it was determined that she also wasn't seriously injured. She was, however, under the influence of alcohol. Consequently, James was arrested on suspicion of DWI and taken to Irvine Jail. No further updates had been provided as of August of 2023. Number 5. Porsche gets totaled. After midnight on November the 6th of 2022, police officers in Verona, New Jersey were called to the scene of a car crash on Grove Avenue. As shown in body cam footage, a woman had driven her Porsche SUV directly into an unoccupied pickup truck that had been parked along the street. The white Porsche was severely damaged, with subsequent reports indicating that it was totaled. The woman had been traveling at a high rate of speed prior to the collision, which caused the parked truck to move several feet. Upon arrival, officers encountered the 30-year-old motorist, who somehow escaped the crash unharmed. The woman, a Cedar Grove resident, was noticeably impaired and unable to perform field sobriety tests. She reportedly threw up before being arrested for driving while intoxicated, as well as multiple traffic offenses. After being processed, she was released to the custody of a family member with a pending date in Verona Municipal Court. Number 4. Amy Ann Dillon. A pair of officers from the Tulsa Police Department in Oklahoma conducted a traffic stop along East 38th Street in the early hours of March the 31st of 2019. While they were carrying out the routine stop, a woman drove up to them in a vehicle that was missing its front right tire. The officers later revealed that they could hear the car coming from a block away because of the abrasive noise caused by the bare metal rim grinding against the asphalt. A concerned citizen had reported seeing the vehicle riding on its rims about 15 minutes before law enforcement encountered it on the road. The original traffic stop was swiftly dealt with, and the officers then pulled over the woman, identified as Amy Ann Dillon. After she pulled into an apartment complex, she could barely stand upright, but claimed to have only consumed 2 tequila shots. Officers reportedly noticed that there was a full margarita sitting in Dillon's cup holder. The woman was taken to David L. Moss Criminal Justice Center and flashed a grin in her booking photo. Her blood alcohol level at the time of the traffic stop was determined to be 0.21. She was charged with DUI, operating a motorized vehicle with defective tires, transport of an open container, and driving without a license. Number 3. Kristen Watts. Florida's flagship bridge, the Sunshine Skyway, which serves as a gateway to Tampa Bay, held its 5th annual 10-kilometer race, dubbed the Skyway 10K, on March the 6th of 2022. Shortly before 9 a.m., a woman in a BMW sedan made her way through the closed toll plaza on the Machete County side of the bridge. She circumvented barricades and drove through traffic cones that had been set up to keep drivers out of the northbound lanes during the race. Upon seeing the oncoming vehicle, 2 state troopers stopped in the middle of the roadway, using their cruisers as physical barricades to protect the thousands of runners on the bridge. The BMW proceeded to smash head-on into the police SUV. The driver of the BMW was identified as 52-year-old Kristen Watts from Sarasota. She was severely impaired and could only perform 1 sobriety exercise before being taken to a hospital for blood testing. Her BAC was measured to be 0.271, more than 3 times the legal limit. She was consequently arrested on DUI charges. The trooper whom Watts struck with her vehicle was identified as Tony Shuck. The latter was heralded as a hero in the incident's aftermath and ended up receiving a key to the city in recognition of her efforts to protect the racers that day. Watts waived a formal arraignment and entered a not guilty plea to all charges. However, in June of 2022, the woman was deemed incompetent to stand trial. She was committed to the Department of Children and Family Services and placed in a mental health treatment facility. In court documents filed that October, a court-appointed doctor's evaluation determined that Watts had been restored to competency and could be tried for the DUI crash. Number 2. Jessica Lee Murphy. A drunk driver caused a wrong-way crash on I-275 in Florida during the early morning hours of March the 22nd of 2019. According to Highway Patrol, 37-year-old Jessica Lee Murphy was behind the wheel of a Subaru Forester, traveling northbound in the southbound lanes of the Interstate. The Subaru eventually struck a Buick Verano being driven by Clearwater resident Priscilla Ann Mouzon, aged 24. The impact sent both vehicles spinning into the west and east shoulders of the highway, and the Subaru reportedly caught fire. Muzon was taken to St. Anthony's Hospital in St. Petersburg, having been seriously injured. Murphy, meanwhile, was brought to Bayfront Health Hospital with only minor wounds. Following her release, she was arrested on charges of DUI with serious injury, reckless driving with serious injury, and driving in the wrong direction. She was booked at the Pinellas County Jail on a $10,000 bond. As usual, we have another release lined up after number 1 still. Stay tuned if you'd like to watch when traffic stops go wrong as well. Number 1. Roswell DUI. Law enforcement in Roswell, New Mexico, responded to the scene of a disabled vehicle in traffic on May the 29th of 2023. Upon arrival, an officer made contact with the young woman in the driver's seat, who indicated that she couldn't get the car to move. She showed signs of intoxication and immediately gave an unprompted admission to drinking alcohol that night. The officer had the motorist step out as he assessed her vehicle, which had sustained major damage to the right front end. The young woman confirmed that she'd crashed the car but couldn't definitively state what she'd hit. She was asked why she decided to drive while drunk, to which she responded it was not a good idea. As backup officers arrived, the 22-year-old motorist was put through a series of field sobriety tests. She was unable to walk in a straight line or balance herself on one leg, and she had trouble following directions. Eventually, the young woman was placed in handcuffs and taken to the police station. She reportedly blew a .24 on a breathalyzer and was consequently charged with DUI. Number 7. James H. Legg. Georgia woman Rose Campbell was pulled over in the city of Alpharetta on May the 4th of 2018 after swerving into a police officer's lane and nearly causing a collision. The 65-year-old was subsequently issued a citation for failure to maintain lane. The officer then presented Campbell with a ticket and told her to sign it. As per state law, it would have served as an acknowledgement that she'd been made properly aware of her alleged offense as well as of the date and time of her scheduled court appearance. Campbell refused to provide her signature, however, as she believed that doing so would have constituted an admission of guilt. In a video captured by the officer's body camera, the woman was shown requesting to speak with a supervisor after she'd been asked to exit her vehicle. The officer then called for backup, and as other members of law enforcement arrived at the scene, the situation rapidly escalated. Campbell attempted to shut her driver's side door, but one of the officers, James H. Legg, forcefully pushed it back open and began yelling at her. He also indicated that the car's tinted windows were making him fear for his safety. Officer Legg then shouted a barrage of profanities at Campbell as he demanded she get out of her car. The volatile traffic stop culminated with the officer grabbing the woman by the arm and forcefully dragging her out of the vehicle before placing her in handcuffs. In the wake of the incident, the Alpharetta Police Department opened an internal investigation into the matter, which ultimately led to Officer Legg resigning from his position. Number 6. The shooting of Charles Galloway. Shortly after 12 a.m. on January the 23rd of 2022, Harris County Deputy Charles Galloway initiated a traffic stop on a white Toyota Avalon in southwest Houston. As was later gathered from eyewitness testimony, the driver got out of the vehicle while Galloway was still in his patrol car and immediately opened fire. The officer was struck by multiple bullets and succumbed to his injuries at the scene. The gunman, identified as 51-year-old Oscar Rosales, fled in his vehicle after the ambush attack. Following a brief manhunt, the suspect was located at a hotel in Ciudad de Acuña, Mexico, where he was placed under arrest and charged with capital murder. It subsequently emerged that Rosales had been a fugitive from justice in Harris County ever since he'd absconded from his parole following an aggravated assault with a deadly weapon conviction in 1995. Rosales had also been wanted in connection to a murder previously committed in El Salvador, and the authorities revealed an intention of contacting other Central American countries to notify them of his capture. 4 additional people face criminal charges for allegedly trying to cover up Rosales' involvement in Galloway's killing. The slain officer, who'd been a 12-year veteran of the force and a field trainer, was honored during a public funeral ceremony that included a 21-gun salute and a helicopter flyover. Number 5. Haley Marie Aiken. On January the 10th of 2019, as she was traveling northbound down Interstate 45 in Conroe, Texas, Haley Marie Aiken was pulled over by a state trooper for driving erratically. Subsequent reports detailed how as soon as the officer had exited his patrol car and begun to approach Aiken's vehicle, the 22-year-old sped away from the scene. The trooper rushed back in his car and pursued the suspect, who was eventually tracked down after exiting the interstate onto Gladstone Street. According to the resulting arrest report, Aiken had displayed clear signs of intoxication while being evaluated by the officer, and she allegedly had difficulty standing up after getting out of her vehicle. She was consequently taken into custody and charged with evading arrest with a vehicle, driving while intoxicated, and bribery. The latter charge stemmed from the young woman allegedly offering money to the state trooper in exchange for a release, a proposition which he promptly rejected. Number 4. Michael McGillis. Mariah Valenzuela was pulled over by a police officer in Phoenix, Arizona, for crossing over the painted center line prior to making a left turn in January of 2020. As was captured on Officer Michael McGillis's body cam, he'd initiated his interaction with the 23-year-old by requesting her license. Venezuela responded by claiming she didn't have any form of identification with her and demanded an explanation for the traffic stop. The officer, who later described the young woman as verbally non-compliant to investigators, was then heard telling her to place her hands behind her back before reaching for his handcuffs. A brief struggle subsequently ensued, in the course of which Officer McGillis caused Valenzuela to topple to the ground. He then pulled the young woman to her feet and handcuffed her as she protested his use of force. After Valenzuela continued to argue with him, the officer shoved her against the side of her car and asked why she refused to act like a young lady. Following her arrest, Valenzuela was charged with numerous offenses, including resisting arrest and DUI, in spite of the fact that her blood alcohol level was reported as being well below the legal driving limit. Prosecutors later reduced her charges to a single traffic ticket for failing to drive on the right side of the road. In July of 2020, Valenzuela launched a civil complaint against Officer McGillis, alleging false arrest and imprisonment. She also came forward with the footage from her brutal run-in with the officer, which had left her with bruises all over her body. According to ABC 15 in Arizona, Officer McGillis had been the subject of multiple formal complaints from people who reported he'd used foul language or unnecessary force during traffic stops in the past. Number 3. Holly Hurt. At approximately 6:30 p.m. on March the 2nd of 2021, an Indiana state trooper in Evansville initiated a traffic stop with a moped rider who'd been operating the vehicle without lights. Upon asking the female driver a series of routine questions, the officer, only identified as Trooper Stewart, recorded that she was driving with a suspended license and expired plates. Stewart also noted that the 37-year-old, who was later named as Boonville resident Holly Hurt, had been showing visible signs of impairment throughout their interaction. The officer thus conducted a sequence of field sobriety tests, during which Hurt allegedly attacked him. She kicked and bit Stewart before he was eventually able to restrain her and place her in handcuffs. Both Stewart and Hurt were subsequently treated for minor injuries at Ascension St. Vincent Hospital, after which the latter was transported to Vanderburgh County Jail, where she was held without bond. Hurt was ultimately charged with operating a vehicle while intoxicated, resisting law enforcement, and battery on a police officer, which is a Class 6 felony in the state of Indiana. Number 2. The arrest of Shibani Balsava and Shilani Sen. Shilani Sen was helping her friend Shibani Balsava move into a new apartment in Los Angeles, California, on February the 8th of 2020, when the U-Haul truck they'd rented was pulled over by the police. Balsava, a film producer, later detailed how she and Sen were confused by the stop, as they hadn't committed any traffic violations. Within moments of the traffic stop being initiated, several additional police vehicles arrived at the scene, and at least 10 members of law enforcement reportedly surrounded the U-Haul with their guns drawn. The occupants of the vehicle were ordered to get out and walk into the middle of the street with their hands above their heads. As Sen and Balsava complied with law enforcement's demands, they reportedly noticed that a police helicopter was flying overhead as well. The two women were forced to lay in the road with their limbs spread apart for several minutes before they were eventually approached by officers. Balsava later claimed that one of the officers thrusted their knee into her lower back and pushed her head down, as they then yanked her arms back and handcuffed her. She and Sen were pulled to their feet and pinned against the side of a patrol car, with guns aimed at them, at which point they were informed that the U-Haul they were driving had previously been reported stolen. Balsova told them that her receipt from the rental truck company was in her purse. Once officers retrieved it from the front seat of the vehicle and ran the two women's names through the police database, Sen and Balsova were released without being charged. It later emerged that U-Haul had reported that the stolen vehicle was recovered, and Los Angeles police had therefore initiated the traffic stop erroneously. In May of 2021, it was reported that Sen and Balsova were filing a federal lawsuit against the city of Los Angeles and its police department, accusing the officers at the scene that day of excessive force, unreasonable search and seizure, negligence, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Number 1. Mohammed Rodwan. Police Constable Stuart Alton pulled over an uninsured white van in Leighton, East London on August the 7th of 2019. During what the 29-year-old officer had expected to be a routine traffic stop, he was viciously attacked by the driver of the vehicle, later identified as Mohammed Rodwan, aged 59. The latter repeatedly struck the officer in the head with a 2-foot-long machete, which was reported as having a rusty blade. Although PC Alton had suffered several critical injuries in the onslaught, including 6 deep puncture head wounds and multiple skull fractures, he ultimately managed to deploy his taser in his attacker's direction. The weapon successfully subdued Rodwan and allowed the officer to call for assistance. In January of the following year, Rodwan was acquitted of attempted murder following a trial at the Old Bailey. He was, however, convicted of wounding with intent to cause grievous bodily harm and consequently imprisoned for a term of 16 years. In the aftermath of the incident, Officer Alton was dubbed Britain's hardest cop due to the manner he'd handled the situation. It was also reported that he'd been awarded the National Police Federation Bravery Award for single-handedly fighting off his attacker after having sustained multiple stab wounds and bone fractures. Thanks for watching. For a week, would you rather drive a car that's missing a tire or have to walk everywhere you go? Let us know in the comments section below.